Welcome back, everybody. We can calm the uniform hysteria for a bit here after the tweet that came out earlier. We'll save it. We got a few more emails we'll get to before we wrap up the show. I mentioned off the top, though, we're into the final week of fall camp at North Dakota State and the University of North Dakota as we close in 12 days out from the opener. Bison will be in Charleston, South Carolina. The Fighting Hawks will be in Manhattan, Kansas. It will not be game one for Kansas State. They actually play this weekend in Ireland. UND will be certainly watching that game with added attention, as will our next guest, Tom Miller, who joins us from the Grand Forks Herald, of course, covers everything going on with UND football, and we'll get an update on that in a minute. There's no easy segue. We talked about off the top of the show about the tragic, horrible news that happened over the weekend with Deng Mayor, a player that spent the last 2 years in Grand Forks. I remember vividly, Tom, his games with the Bison. Frankly, this year he was really good. He carved out a really good role with Paul Sather's team over the last couple of years.
Yeah, you sometimes weren't sure what you were going to get sometimes with him, but he had that ability to give you a good night on any given night, regardless of your opponent, because of his length and his athleticism was just through the roof. And there were times where he was very impactful with that length, and yeah, just a brutal situation there.
It's just, you see it, and you know this now, being a dad with a couple of young kids, myself too, just 22 years old, just whole life in front of you. You hold your loved ones tighter. It's just a horrible, horrible deal.
100%. Yep. We don't know how long our tape measures are. We never know.
No, and for a guy that came here looking for an opportunity, and Sather has done this with a handful of guys, you know this better than anybody, that just looking for a chance to play Division I basketball, he got that, and he was going to get another chance to do it with Chris Crutchfield at Omaha. And I know just with Sather's comments last night, this is a guy that meant a lot to him, and even in the 2 years he was in Grand Forks.
Yeah, you saw quite a few former teammates really rallying and had a lot of good things to say about him as a teammate, especially.
Just a awful, awful deal. And thoughts to his family on that. There's no easy segue. We'll try and make one as seamless as possible. As I mentioned off the top, this is unique for UND football that their opponent is actually playing before everybody else. Give us the lowdown on how they prepared for this, knowing they get a game's worth of tape, unlike anybody else, since K-State plays in week 0.
Yeah, North Dakota's really sticking with the old cliche of us against us. So you don't get a lot of comments about that. I've seen the situation play out a little bit when UND opened at Nebraska a couple of years ago. Nebraska had just come off that game overseas against Northwestern, I believe. So I think it can be advantageous for the FCS team that gets that second week. I don't think Nebraska was particularly sharp, but then again, that version of Nebraska wasn't particularly sharp for an extended period of time. So it's hard to say how much that impacts your opponent.
This fall camp has obviously been unique with a new coach, new staff, new players. Before we dive into the position battles, how have you approached that in terms of focusing on the newness around UND football?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. It's because you have Eric Schmidt who comes back, and part of you kind of feels like no time left at all, even though he obviously had 3 stops between the last time he was here. But there is a weird thing, especially with the way the last staff was around for so long. And some of those guys were around my age, the Danny Freund, Joel Schwenzfire, Sam King. You develop such a level of comfort there, knowing who's going to be out there. And then, spring ball rolls around and it's a bunch of guys wearing uni football stuff. And it kind of felt like it was like a TV show where, there's a bunch of imposters out there wearing UND stuff that, you're not familiar with. So it's been a weird feeling out process here and just taking the first steps and kind of building some of those relationships here.
Quarterback obviously is the one that's going to get the attention. Normally that they brought in a transfer that Schmidt knew from San Diego State. How has that played out? And do we expect a starter to be named relatively soon? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, there could be some gamesmanship in the fact that there might not be that much advantage into announcing a starting quarterback. I say that fully understanding that I don't think the job has actually been won. I'm not sitting on any
Yep.
information over here that plays into that line of thinking. Really, it is. There'll be 3 practices go by that I think it's Simon Rumfo. There's 3 more practices that go by that feel like Jerry Kaminsky, and there are moments of Javance Tapuada Johnson.
You
I'm
got it,
getting there.
man.
I'm
You got
saying
it.
it. I've been working. I finally figured out how to spell it naturally. That was first step. And he has his moments where exactly what you'd expect. You understand why he was highly sought, and you understand why perhaps he's trying to reboot his career a little bit, which is what you get all the time with these
Yep.
transfers, right? The reason that the situation exists, and I think the 3 of those guys have been taking turns, and I think they really want to run the quarterback and lean on that offensive line, but that doesn't solve the situation either because all 3 guys are in different ways very mobile quarterbacks too.
Is this something you imagine this week? Like 10 days out, you probably want to know who your starting quarterback is.
Yeah, I think we're going to see multiple quarterbacks at Kansas State enough that
Okay.
perhaps they won't even announce one. Now,
Interesting.
there's certainly something to be said, right? Like you want your starting quarterback to be taking snaps from your starting center, and you want them to experience the maximum amount of reps with the top wide receivers and top tight ends, and so you're going to want to see some of those ones play together. Um, I just don't think they're there yet.
Yeah.
And maybe that quickly changes here. But like I said, I think you're going to see multiple quarterbacks in Manhattan.
Email comes in to ask Tom about the running back transfer, Xavier Lee from Sacred Heart. How does he fit into the offense, knowing Zebarth's back, Seidel's back? Where did he carve out a role for him at running back in your mind?
Yeah, the way running back has been these days, you've got to be by committee. Nobody's really a one-man show all that
Uh-uh.
much anymore. And so that, with Gavin Seabarth being the between the tackles star and Sawyer Seidel is kind of the home run hitter outside the tackles, I think that Isaiah Smith role, and Isaiah Smith graduated a year ago, is very valuable. A guy who can do both. And I think you're going to need somebody who can catch the ball out of the backfield, but also run it up the middle. And I think he has that Isaiah Smith-like skill set. I'm not saying he's Isaiah
Yeah.
Smith, but I think he can give them something, because he has that versatility that maybe they miss, where those other 2 guys are a little bit more one-dimensional.
Is there in that vein, is there a transfer that's caught your eye? Say this guy he's going to come in and help him right away.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, BJ Fleming from Northern Arizona has looked good in fall camp. Spring ball, I wasn't sure what they had there. I think he was still kind of coming through an injury or in a new system in a new place. But I thought he's had a good fall camp at wide receiver. There's a role there to be had with Bo Belko's
Yeah,
catches going
right.
away. I think Zach Lewis, another Northern Arizona guy at safety, has looked pretty good. Bennett Walker will play quite a bit at the cornerback spot, who comes over from San Diego State for one more go around. So those 3 guys, I would say, would probably be some of the more impactful guys off the top of my head here.
You hit wide receiver, and that was one to me. Like, who's going to – it's one thing we got to worry about who's throwing it. We got to worry who's catching it. That's the thing to me throughout fall camp. I've been watching or keeping an eye on, like, okay, who's going to be the guys for whoever is the starting quarterback that are going to be the weapons on the outside with Bo gone now.
Yeah, and I don't think that position group is a strength right now. I think, I think Caden Dennis has had a good fall camp. I think, Nate DeMontenac has had a career here that has shown signs that he could be that next man. I think the problem is that not only is there not a defined number one, I do think BJ Fleming has the skills to become a number one. I think they really are missing that 2-3. There's just a lot of
Yeah.
guys like I could tell you who could be, oh, he's a good 4, he's a good 5. But if you got 7 of them, that's not great.
You know,
So there's guys you'd like to see some more. Can Dang emerge into that? He's been a little quiet this fall, but he's got the physical skill set to join that conversation. But it's a position group that needs to improve over time. And I don't think I don't think they've quick fixed it very well.
all right, we've spent all the time on offense. How about defensively? Especially, I look at linebacker was a spot to me like, okay, what are they going to do there? What have you seen at that position?
Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy. You go from a 4 linebacker setup to a 2 linebacker setup,
Yeah.
yet we're talking about how thin they are
Yeah.
there.
Right.
Now you move some of those guys down to edge, and there's some attrition. But you know you're going to have to lean really heavily on Malachi McNeil, who's probably your top defender returning. And it comes down to Payne Parks, a Forks Red River
Yeah.
kid who has a lot of athletic ability. He's going to wear the defensive communication helmet.
Yep.
So there's a lot of that piece on him. But right now, you know, Malachi McNeil is the only proven linebacker, and you're going to start Payne Parks, but you don't know a ton of what you have there. And then it gets really dicey. You've got a Devereaux kid who came over from Old Dominion. You know, I'm not exactly sure what his skill set's going to be, but he's going to have to play. And then the fourth guy they're talking about is the kid from Crookston, Ethan Bowl,
Mm.
who was who was swimming a little bit as a newcomer to the program a year ago. But they like what he's brought this fall camp. But liking what you brought to this fall camp and playing as your fourth guy, who can quickly become your second or third guy in college football. So linebacker is a dangerous spot, corner is a dangerous spot for them, and D tackle are three tough spots.
Payne Parks was all-world high school player. I mean, it shows a level of trust if he's wearing the green dot, but also there's a level of pressure that comes with you got to be able to go out there and do it as well, Tom, if you're going to be having the dot on.
Yeah, 100%. And his maturity has really impressed me when I've spoke to him on the side. He's a kid I think who can really handle that, and you know, just as important is embracing that and really is taking pride in that being part of his responsibilities. And so he can really move.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be his strength is he can get to a lot of things, and you're going to need that to happen with two linebackers.
No, you're a busy man. I know it's been a long week. Thanks so much for the time, bud. Be well. We'll catch up before the opener next week, okay?
Absolutely. Love talking football with you, Dom. Take
Thanks,
care.
bud. There he goes. Tom Miller from the Grand Forks Herald joining us. UND wrapping up its last week of fall camp, and they'll be on the road in Manhattan. Night kickoff against Kansas State coming up next Saturday. I can say that, next Saturday. Awesome. We'll take our final break. We come back, got a bunch of emails to get to. Much more on the uniform controversy, call it that. And we'll wrap up the show. Hot Mike, back after this.